President has lived up to one of his campaign promises. This is not something new. Remember, you go all the way back to his national speech during the campaign, and he reiterated this many times, that he wanted to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Sometimes he called it a digital asset stockpile. What we've ultimately done here is both. He also, in his week one EO on crypto, you guys remember I came on the show to talk about that. He asked our president's working group on digital assets to evaluate the idea of a reserve or stockpile. And we made a recommendation, and this administration is moving at tech speed. It's really great to work for an administration where you can actually get things done and things move quickly. We made our recommendation, and then we worked with the lawyers to implement it, and the president signed it last night. But this is fully consistent with everything he's always said.
Agree on that. I guess the one criticism that you're going to get when you go face the media, so I might as well put it here, is the order in which you're doing things. Sometimes Mr. Trump is very expressive on the social medias, which is better than, let's say, the previous administration, which just wasn't available and in cognitive decline. So I guess the question of he announces something and then you guys explain it deeper. Is that the optimal way to do this? Should we not worry about it? Should you come out with like more official stuff? I guess that's the move fast, break things that we are used to in Silicon Valley, but that people, whether it's in business, are maybe a little concerned about, that things are maybe different now in the White House and in how we're running our government. Maybe you could expand on that.
Have you ever considered that maybe you just had an overreaction to a tweet?
Well, okay. So if we're going to place the blame on me,
I'm just saying that
I wasn't the only one. The original crypto OGs were like, wait a second, why is he picking these three and not these three? So that made a lot of people, putting myself out of it, like, whoa, what's going on here? Is he picking favorites? And that's, I guess, everybody's big concern. So maybe you could assuage that.
We're not. Yeah, we're not picking favorites, obviously, except I will say this. We do think Bitcoin is special, and I can get into the reasons
explain why. That's a great thing, yeah.
Well, Bitcoin's the original cryptocurrency. It's the first one. It's the only one that doesn't have an issuer, right? It's very decentralized. It's, in crypto, they call this the Immaculate Conception. We don't really know how it got here. We don't know who Satoshi is. It's almost mystical, you would say.
Yes.
It's the most valuable one. It has a $2 trillion market cap, and it's the most secure. It's never been hacked, right? So we're now, over 15 years into this journey, and there's been a lot of people who've been skeptical along the way, and there's been a lot of ups and downs, but here it is. I remember back in 2011, I think it's the first time I bought a Bitcoin. I think it was at $120. Now it's at $90,000. Again, there have been all sorts of wild swings along the way, but this thing just keeps chugging along. And you can think of that $2 trillion market cap as like a $2 trillion bug bounty. If there was a way to hack this, there's every incentive in the world. And by hack, I mean like to double spend, create basically a counterfeit Bitcoin, I guess would be the way for people to think about it. And so
is a miracle it hasn't been compromised. I think we can all say that.
Well, I don't know if it's a miracle. I think it's exceptional design.
David Sachs has come out to spill the beans on the secrets of the strategic crypto reserve that no one knows anything about. He goes into detail about the ins and outs of the reserve, how the government will handle it, and what Trump privately thought about it. As whispers and speculation mount, could this be the tipping point where traditional fiscal policy intertwines with the realm of digital assets? Stay tuned as we unravel everything about this crypto future. Welcome back to Investocracy Crypto.
And there's been every incentive to basically break the encryption, and it continues to chug along. And so I think the price has gone up as the protocol has gotten more acceptance. And this is another point, is that Bitcoin's most widely accepted as a store of value throughout the world.
Yeah.
So we do believe it should be treated special. Now, that being said, we're also creating the digital asset stockpile. So all the other digital assets...
Explain the difference between these two. So there's a digital asset stockpile. That's the picker. And then on the other side, there's a strategic reserve for Bitcoin, because we do acquire Bitcoin, we, the United States of America, when we seize from terrorists, criminals, et cetera. We do seize these. And then we often make the mistake of liquidating them when maybe we should be holding them. Yeah. So explain that architecture.
So we have the reserve and we have the stockpile. So the reserve is just Bitcoin. The goal is long-term preservation. Think of it as like a digital Fort Knox for digital gold. We want to put the digital gold in there. We want to keep it secure. We never want to sell it. That's the goal of the reserve. And you're right that we've made the mistake in the past of selling this stuff. At one point in time, we had about 400,000 Bitcoin on the federal balance sheet. We sold roughly half of that for something like $360 million. Total. If we had held all of that, it would be worth, just that the portion we sold would be worth over 17 billion. So we made this mistake of prematurely selling Bitcoin when we should have held it. We don't want to make that mistake with regard to the rest of it. We think there's around 200,000 coins left on the federal balance sheet, but the truth is that nobody knows because we've never done a proper audit. So part of what this executive order provides is that we're going to do for the first time a government-wide accounting of the digital assets that we actually have. So,
and if digital assets emerge in some department, I don't know, the FBI seizes some, the CIA seizes some, I don't know which organization winds up having them, they're going to be legally required to report that and then put them in the reserve.
Well, they'll be legally required to report it, and then they'll go in the reserve if there's a final adjudication. So, obviously, if those coins could go back as restitution to victims, or if the person who they were seized from wins their court case and gets them back, they're not going to go into the Federal Reserve. But if there's been a final adjudication and a final forfeiture, yes, those will go into the reserve.
David Sachs sheds light on the strategic crypto reserve and how Trump is actually going to approach it during a revealing interview on the All In podcast. According to Sachs, meticulous strategies are in place for the government to potentially bolster its digital asset reserves without burdening taxpayers or altering the federal budget. This emerging strategy demonstrates a shift in fiscal policy aimed at embracing the digital age.
I've seen reports that it might have, for example, 50,000 ETH, which is Ethereum. But again, we need to get to the bottom of that. When we figure out exactly what the assets are, we're going to move them into the digital stockpile. The purpose of the stockpile is responsible stewardship. It's a place for safekeeping. It's a centralized, you could say, account under the direction of the Secretary of the Treasury. And the Secretary of the Treasury will figure out how to maximize the values of these holdings. Now, there's a couple of important differences between stockpile and reserve. So one is the reserve, the executive order actually provides that the Secretary of the Treasury will not sell the Bitcoin. Okay, we're prohibited from selling the Bitcoin. There's no such prohibition with respect to the stockpile. If the Secretary of the Treasury decides that it's in the long-term interest of the U.S. to rebalance the portfolio or change the portfolio, the Secretary has the discretion to do that.
Okay, which makes sense because there's a long tail of crypto. We might see something that we don't have the ability to predict the future, and we don't have the staff to sit there and look at these assets every day like a fund manager would and say, what do we do with these? What percentage should it be of the overall stockpile, of the overall holdings? So maybe the decision with Ethereum is, hey, this thing's waning. We just put it into Bitcoin because we know that's the more solid one. Yeah, that's what I'm reading into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's largely fair. I mean, look, I think that the stockpile should be subject to good portfolio management, right? And fortunately, we have a Secretary of the Treasury who is an extremely successful former hedge fund manager. So he's going to figure out the best way to manage these assets. And we give him the flexibility to do portfolio management. Whereas,
and
like
he has to live and die with what he does. He has to make those decisions, and that's going to be, part of how he's evaluated by the president. So hopefully he's going to be sharp about that.
Right, but the reserve is different, right? The reserve is just digital Fort Knox. Now, there's one other important difference between stockpile and reserve. So with respect to reserve, the EO provides that the secretaries, and I'm talking about Treasury and Commerce, they're allowed to figure out strategies to accumulate more Bitcoin for the reserve if those strategies are budget neutral and don't cost the taxpayer anything, okay? So it's possible that we could, I'm not saying that we will, but it authorizes them to acquire more Bitcoin if they can figure out a way to do it that doesn't impact the federal budget or the deficit or taxpayers, right?
Sachs further elaborates on how past decisions might have cost taxpayers dearly. An illustrative example he presents is of the missed opportunity worth over $17 billion, a sum the government could have reaped from its previous Bitcoin holdings if retained. Instead, without a cohesive strategy, those assets were sold off. But before going any further, if you made it this far into the video, thank you. These videos take a lot of effort and time to make. So, if you enjoyed them, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. This goes a long way in helping us grow. That said, back to the video.
And I want to make an angel investing coin, or I want to do something fun, an NFT collection for All In or something. When will we have the actual rules of the road? And that's going to be multiple agencies, right?
Yeah. What you're describing is known in Washington, or the area of policy that you're describing is known as market structure. And market structure is about providing a clear framework for market participants. It would define what is a security, what's a commodity, what's simply a collectible. It's just property, but it's not a security. And then what are the rules for each category? That's known as market structure. There is a bill that passed the last Congress in the House, but Biden basically, he didn't veto it, but he and the Democrats stopped it. He stopped it in the Senate. The Democrats did. It was called FIT 21. and it was authored by French Hill, who's now the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee. So we expect that he will be introducing a new version of his bill probably in the next few weeks. I don't think I'm breaking any news by saying this. I think people expect it. And that's going to provide the framework for market structure. And it's going to provide a lot of the definitions that you're talking about. Now, I agree with your sentiment, okay, but I will say that I might have a different view than you of what is a security, what's not. I mean, to me, collectibles are not securities, but if it's a collectible, you got to disclaim that, look, this has no intrinsic value, right? That's a collectible. Think about a baseball card. A baseball card is a piece of cardboard. It has no intrinsic value, but the value comes from basically other collectors being willing to buy it from you. And you could just say that that's irrational or whatever. But so look, I think as long as people disclaim that this coin has no intrinsic value, they should be able to issue meme coins. It's a separate question why people would want to buy them. But look, in my view, that's very different than someone who goes out as an issuer and says, I'm issuing a token or a coin that has lots of functionality and has lots of value. And you'll hear some of these guys even say that, hey, our token is more valuable than Bitcoin. You should value it more highly. Well, if you're promising that and you're saying that it's going to have certain functionality, you better be telling the truth about it.
The intersection of traditional finance and innovative cryptocurrency strategies offers a unique opportunity for investors eyeing Bitcoin. As the federal government considers amassing this digital gold into a strategic reserve, the implications are vast and potentially lucrative. But what do you think? Share your thoughts. And finally, if you would like to know more about cryptocurrencies or specifically Bitcoin, go ahead and click on the next video on your screen. See you there.